Time seems to stop, clocks seem to lie, and entire streets can act as portals to alternate timelines. These are more anomalies in time. Did CERN alter our reality? This Reddit user had a very eerie experience while heading home. This happened a few years ago, and I still think about it. I was driving home from work on a route that I had taken every day for years. I remember stopping at one red light, checking the clock on my dash, and thinking I was running a little late. Next thing I know, though, pulling into my driveway. The weird part is the time. According to the clock, about 10 minutes had passed. That doesn't sound like much. My drive was usually under 5. There's nowhere to accidentally zone out and add time. No long roads, wasn't much traffic that day, I wasn't tired. Yet I don't remember anything between the red light and my street. I've tried to write it off as autopilot driving, but can't seem to shake the feeling that the missing time just doesn't add up. And from a now deleted Reddit user, we have a very odd story about a new hallway suddenly showing up in an office building. Redditor wrote the following: I work in a fairly standard office building with cubicles, conference rooms, the usual. Well, one afternoon, I was walking to grab a printout from the supply room. That's when I turned down a hallway I swear I'd never noticed before. The walls, the carpet, the lighting, it all looked part of the building, but everything felt off. I walked the entire hall, saw no one, reached the end, and there was just a locked door that definitely wasn't there before. I turned around and went right back the way I came. I asked a coworker later if they knew about a new hallway or storage area, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Nothing had changed. The rest of the day, I just kept thinking about it. Next, let's talk about something called the chronostasis effect. This is something most people have experienced, even if they didn't know it had a name. You glance at the clock, and for a split second, the second hand looks frozen. It feels like that second lasts longer than it should. And then everything goes back to normal. That effect is called chronostasis, and it's not the clock malfunctioning. It's your brain, sort of. Here's what's actually happening in simple terms. When your eyes quickly move, like when you look from one thing to another, your brain kind of blocks out what you see during that movement. Otherwise, everything would just be all blurry. Instead of letting you notice a tiny gap in time, your brain fills it in. It stretches the first moment you see after the eye movement to cover that missing time. So you look at a clock, your brain makes it feel like the second hand has been sitting there longer than it really has. In a way, you're experiencing this brief little moment that never actually happened. You're not imagining it though, your subconscious brain is just kind of editing reality right in front of you. It's kind of nuts. Speaking of being confused when looking at your clock, this next Reddit user had a very unsettling experience writing, I woke up for work like normal and checked my phone. It said 7:12. I remember it clearly because I was relieved. I thought I'd overslept, but I still had time. Got up, showered, made coffee, fed the cat, all the usual stuff. I even remember checking the time again while my coffee was brewing, still around 7:20 something. When I got in my car and started it, the dashboard clock said 6:38. At first I thought my car clock was wrong, but it's always been accurate. I checked my phone again, now it said 6:38 too. I didn't suddenly feel like I'd gained extra time, it was just earlier again. I guess the clock on my phone was wrong and then corrected itself? Is that even a thing? Can't shake the feeling that I lived part of that morning twice. Quick question. How does Mickey Mouse hold up his pants? A lot of people will confidently say suspenders, at least some of us anyway. You can kind of picture them, especially in that very first cartoon that's etched so many of our brains. Steamboat Willie from 1928. Now, which one of these versions do you think is the real one? If you guess the one on the left, you're wrong. Those thin straps over his shoulders, they've never existed. At least not in this current reality. In the original cartoons, the official character art, the theme parks, none of it shows Mickey wearing suspenders. He just has shorts with 2 buttons. And tell me if this pops into your head. You know, because I kind of looked at this and I was like, yeah, modern Mickey Mouse, I don't always think of the suspenders, but definitely in that old cartoon. It just looks right. And when I picture that black and white cartoon in my head, I always think of Mickey like pulling his suspenders and snapping them back, and apparently I'm not alone on that, but what do you all think? In 2012, something strange showed up in real particle experiments studying B mesons, which are short-lived particles created in huge numbers at particle colliders. Researchers at the Babar experiment in California looked at billions of these particles and how they changed over time. What they found was that certain transitions happened more often in one direction than they did in the reverse. So in other words, the forward behavior didn't match the backward behavior. One report described the findings like this. Scientists, quote, found that certain certain particle types change into one another much more often in one way than they do in the other, a violation of time reversal symmetry. So, what does that actually mean? Well, when these B mesons behaved one way, there wasn't the same chance of seeing them behave the opposite way. If time truly worked exactly the same forward and backward, these rates should match, but they didn't. Scientists saw an imbalance. That doesn't mean particles are traveling back in time or whatever. What it does mean, though, is that at a very tiny level, the universe seems to prefer one direction over the other. In normal life, we still only experience time moving forward, but deep down, the rules may not be as black and white as we thought. Picture the Starbucks logo. Probably pretty easy for most of us. I mean, in a lot of places, Starbucks is inescapable. Tell me which of these logos you think is accurate, though. It's the one with the star. But people are pretty divided by this. There are a lot of people who have absolutely no memory of that star. Granted, a star makes sense. I mean, the place is called Starbucks, but I mean, there's no King's Crown in the Burger King logo. This image was posted to Reddit, and one commenter said they work at Starbucks and have never even noticed the star. So, what do you all think? Share your thoughts down below. In 2014 and 15, a team of physicists in Australia published work about something called closed time-like curves. A closed time-like curve is just a fancy way of talking about a path through space and time that loops back to itself, like a particle going out and then somehow coming back to meet its earlier self. In real life, we have no idea if this is actually possible, but scientists found a clever way to imitate what that might look like in a controlled experiment. In the study, researchers built a lab experiment that didn't literally send anything into the past, but it did mimic what would happen if a particle could interact with its own past self. They used a tiny particle called a qubit, and they used another qubit to act like the, for lack of a better term, past version of the first one. By carefully controlling how these two qubits interacted, they created a situation where the first qubit's state would affect the second qubit, and the second qubit would affect the first, just like a loop through time. What they were testing is the idea that if time could loop, particles could behave in ways that normal physics would not allow. In the experiment, the qubits ended up in states that are impossible if time only moves forward. For example, they could solve problems that normally quantum particles couldn't solve, like distinguishing between states that are normally indistinguishable. Here's a fun fact. Clocks in different places really do measure time differently, and I'm not talking about clocks being busted. In the early 70s, physicists Joseph Haffel and Richard Keating took atomic clocks aboard commercial airplanes flying around the world. They compared those airborne clocks to identical clocks left on the ground. After the flights, they checked all the clocks. The ones on the planes didn't match the ones on the ground. The clocks that flew eastward lost time compared to the ground clocks, and the ones that flew westward gained time. This happened for a very clear reason according to Einstein's relativity. A clock that moves fast relative to you ticks more slowly. A clock deeper in a gravity field ticks more slowly than one higher up. Both effects showed up in the flying clocks. The ones moving fast and closer to the Earth age differently than the stationary ones. Engineers even have to correct for these effects in the GPS satellites that tell your phone where you are, because if they didn't, GPS would drift off by kilometers every day. So time itself doesn't flow at the same rate everywhere. It's almost a direct, measured anomaly in time. This next story comes from a now deleted Reddit user who described a possible glitch in reality while walking through their neighborhood. It goes as follows. So this happened to me yesterday, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and I usually take the same route when I go for my evening walk. Yesterday, I left around 7 p.m., headphones in, same path as always. About halfway down the street, I noticed something weird. The same kid on a bike passed me, going the same direction I think I passed him earlier in the day. Okay, not too strange, maybe a coincidence. Then I saw my neighbor's car parked in the driveway, but it had a completely different license plate than it usually does. Then I walked past another house I passed literally every day, and the front porch decorations were exactly the same as a week ago. Not changed at all. I'm positive, though, I saw them swap out the decorations a few days ago. By the next morning, everything was back to normal. My neighbor's car was the right one again. The decorations had changed. but I can't shake the feeling that I somehow walked through a glitch in reality. When spacecraft swing past Earth, they use the planet's gravity to pick up speed and slingshot toward their next destination. Scientists calculate these flybys extremely carefully. Every curve, every boost, every tiny push of gravity is predicted to incredible precision, but in some cases, spacecraft come out of these flybys with a tiny bit more speed than expected. It's just a few millimeters per second, but it's enough that it can't be ignored. Multiple missions, including Galileo, NEAR, and Rosetta, show the same thing. The numbers just didn't match their calculations. Nobody fully understands why it happens. Some theories involve weird interactions with Earth's rotation, the planet's shape, or even something in the spacecraft itself, but so far, no explanation fits all the cases. Some scientists call it a kind of time anomaly because, in a way, the spacecraft's movement over time doesn't line up with what our physics predicts. Black holes are already strange. They warp space, bend light, and crush matter. They also mess with our understanding of time itself. Back in the 70s, Stephen Hawking discovered that black holes slowly lose energy by emitting what we now call Hawking radiation. That means they can shrink and eventually disappear, but according to the math, any information that falls into a black hole could be lost forever, and that breaks a core rule of physics. Information can't just disappear. Everything that happens in the universe leaves a trace. If black holes destroy that trace, what's going on? Physicists call this the information paradox, and it's still unresolved. We don't know exactly how time and information behave inside or around black holes. This doesn't mean time travel is happening, but it does mean that in some of the most extreme places in the universe, some of our most fundamental theories about time, cause and effect, and the flow of events doesn't fully line up. At CERN, scientists smash particles together at insane speeds. Most of the time, what comes out is messy and random, but a few years ago, they noticed something strange. Two particles created in the same collision were acting like they were still connected to each other, even after they flew apart. These particles are called top quarks. They only exist for a tiny fraction of a second before they break down into other particles. They disappear so fast, you'd expect them to act completely independently once they're gone, but when researchers looked closely, they saw patterns that didn't line up with that idea. What they found was that certain properties of one particle were linked to the other one, meaning when one behaved a certain way, the other matched it. That kind of connection only happens if the particles are entangled, but these particles were not sitting next to each other. They were created in violent collisions that immediately moved apart. There was no time for signals to pass between them in any normal way, yet somehow the connection was still there. This was entanglement happening at the highest energies humans have ever reached. It seems that at a very basic level, the universe doesn't always behave the way we'd expect it to. Now, anyone remember Wii Sports? I used to play it all the time. I got pretty far in my virtual boxing career in this game. I could still hear that announcer exclaiming those two beautiful words, "You win!" Only that never happened. I mean, me winning happened. I won so much, I'll tell you, but there's no announcer that actually says, "You win." User Rampos7 posted on the Mandela Effect Reddit, writing, "I was building some contraption and decided that I wanted to use a sound effect of the Wii Sports announcer saying 'you win.' I can hear him saying it in my mind's eye. I asked other people I know, and they all agree that the announcer says 'you win.' He, of course, does not. Did anyone else think that he did?" And I pose that same question to all of you. Yes, you specifically. Next up, we have an odd little phenomenon known as the Kappa effect. It shows how our brains aren't always great at judging time. Scientists have found that the distance between things we can see can change how long we think time lasts, even when the timing is exactly the same. This is known as the Kappa effect, or perceptual time dilation. Basically, when two things happen one after the other in different places, our minds don't judge the time between them properly if there's a big gap in space between them. If two flashes of light appear and the second one is farther away from the first, people will think more time passed between them, even when it didn't. If the flashes are closer together in space, people think less time passed. Again, even though the timing was the same. This has been shown in controlled lab studies using visual flashes, and versions of it show up in auditory and touch experiments as well. It seems that our sense of time is not separate from our sense of space. Our brains kind of muddy the two. So even something as basic as distance can bend how we experience time. Next up, I have another Mandela effect for you. The Scooby-Doo gang. They're iconic, right? Especially Shaggy and Scoob. And you close your eyes and you can picture them instantly. Scooby with that goofy smile and blue collar, Shaggy with his classic green shirt, Adam's apple sticking out, and that patchy goatee. Except one of those things with Shaggy is not actually accurate. Which do you think it is? It's the Adam's apple. He doesn't have it. But don't we all picture it? He's tall and gangly and he has a big Adam's apple. It just fits. So what is this weird reality we now find ourselves in where that little detail is missing? According to Redditor DateRichWillow_up22, they may have briefly entered into an alternate timeline. I was in our office kitchen grabbing coffee when my manager asked me to attend a quick meeting in the conference room. I walked in, and a few coworkers were already there. We started talking about a project, went over a few documents, and I remember the discussion clearly. When I went back to my desk, I mentioned the meeting to another colleague, only to get a confused look. "What meeting?" they said. I asked the manager later. He said no one scheduled anything. The room hadn't been booked. I'm 100% sure the conversation happened though. I even remember specific comments from coworkers, but when I checked my email and calendar, there was no record, no reminder, nothing. It's like the meeting existed for me, but not for everyone else. Have you ever heard of the Oz factor? There's a strange experience people have reported for decades. The world suddenly feels like it stops. All the typical sounds you normally hear, like birds, traffic, and all the movement, it just pauses. It often lasts only a few seconds, maybe half a minute at most. But while it's happening, there's this uncanny feeling of time being off. Some even describe feeling like they've stepped into a totally different reality. The term Oz factor was coined by British researcher Jenny Randalls in the late 80s. She noticed this same description popping up again and again in reports from people who claim strange encounters or unexplained experiences. Different countries, different ages of the people, same feeling though, silence, awkward, eerie stillness. What's interesting though is that this doesn't only happen during dramatic events. Some people report it while walking home or sitting in their car, and then just as suddenly everything comes back. The sound rushes in, birds start chirping, cars pass by again. Psychologists have acknowledged that people genuinely experience this, but there's no agreed upon explanation. Bold Street in Liverpool is usually just a busy shopping street. Cafes and clothing stores, bookshops, but over the years it's also become known for something a lot stranger. People claim they briefly stepped into the past while walking down it. One of the most talked about stories comes from a retired police officer named Frank. In 1996, he was walking along Bold Street to meet his wife for coffee when something fell off. The shops around him didn't look right. Modern storefronts were gone, replaced with older ones. The people around him were dressed like it was the 1950s. Even the cars parked along the street looked decades old now. Trying to make sense of it, Frank walked into a shop called Cripps to buy something for his wife. The moment he stepped inside, everything snapped back. The shop was modern again. The street outside looked normal. All the old cars and vintage clothes were gone. Bold Street as he always knew it. And there's another story from 2006. A couple was shopping on Bold Street when the woman decided to step into a bookshop. As soon as she entered, she felt this chill. Inside the shop, it looked completely different. The books, the shelves, everything felt like it belonged to the early 1900s. She rushed back outside and found herself back in the present, with her husband confused about why she looked so shaken up. There are plenty of stories like this tied to Bold Street. For whatever reason, this street has earned a reputation as a place where time doesn't always seem to behave the way it should.
In our number 5 spot today, we have time travel _0. Okay, so this is one that at the time was both one of the most famous and one of the most believed cases around. In the year 2000, an online thread began about time travel paradoxes on a forum for the Time Travel Institute. On the thread, a user commented on how a time machine could theoretically be made, and this prompted the response of a user whose screen name was time travel _0, and they said, "Wow, Paul is right on the money. I was just about to give up hope on anyone knowing who Tipler or Kerr was on this word line." By the way, number 2 is the correct answer, and the basics for time travel start at CERN in about a year and end in 2034 with the first time machines built by GE. Too bad we can't post pictures, or I'd show it to you. Okay, so this is obviously insinuating that whoever the heck time travel _0 is is a time traveler. Throughout the next year, people continued to post questions and messages they had for this guy on that thread, and throughout time, TimeTravel_0 became known as John Titor, and he told us all his story in great detail. He said that he had been sent back to 1975 in order to bring an IBM 5100 computer to his own time, but he was just stopping into 2000 for a brief rest on his way back home. I guess time travel is exhausting? I personally would not know. He said that the reason for the mission to get the computer was because he needed it to debug various legacy computer programs in 2036 in order to combat a known problem where UNIX was going to have a problem in 2038, similar to what people thought was going to happen in the changeover from 1999 to 2000. There definitely are people out there who still believe that John was a real time traveler, so I guess I'll just leave this one up to you to decide. In our number 4 spot today, we have the time traveling hipster. This photo appeared on the Virtual Museum of Canada website, and it was originally taken in 1941. The photo is said to have been taken at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia, Canada. At a first glance, this photo is just normal and that story sounds perfectly reasonable, but once we take a closer look, it is clear why this photo went viral. There's that one guy in it who isn't dressed similarly to anyone else in the photo. While someone with their own unique personal style isn't exactly an anomaly, it certainly is very weird and suspicious that he seems like he could be from our current times, which is exactly why he has been dubbed the time-traveling hipster. It appears as though he is wearing a more modern style of sunglasses, some sort of printed t-shirt with a cardigan over top, and it even looks like he is holding some sort of compact camera that wasn't exactly widespread in the 1940s. Maybe the time-traveling hipster really is just that, or maybe he really just was a guy from 1941 who walked off the beaten path so that hipsters today could run. I'm not really sure what to make of this one, to be honest. In our number 3 spot today, we have Andrew Carlson. On January 28, 2003, Andrew Carlson was arrested and held by the police for insider trading at Wall Street. This was because of the fact that in 2 weeks, through the stock market, Andrew was able to go from having $800 to making $350 million. Yep, $350 million in 2 weeks. That is absolutely insane. When the authorities arrested him, they assumed he made his profits through obtaining illegal insider trading information, but when they asked him how he was able to do this, Andrew said that he was actually from the year 2256, and so he knew exactly how all of the stocks were going to perform. Obviously, no one believed this story and just assumed he was telling an extremely far-fetched lie, which in circumstances like this would seem like a pretty safe assumption. But get this, when Andrew was released on bail, he totally disappeared, and despite several attempts to find him, no one has ever been able to locate him. To make matters even a little wilder, it is said that he was also able to accurately predict the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. Not sure how, but that's what the internet tells me. In our number 2 spot today, we have Edward. Edward is a man who has claimed that he has proof of the apocalypse, and he even brings photos along to prove it. Edward first appeared on Apex TV, which I'll be the first to admit hasn't exactly been a source of credible information, but who knows, maybe this is the time that they got it right. Edward claims that he was part of a top secret program in 2004 and that he was chosen to time travel to the year 5000. This photo I just talked about is a photo that Edward carries that shows Los Angeles completely underwater. In fact, Edward says that in the year 5000 the entire world is underwater, but humans have found a way to live on the water. He claims it happened because of global warming and explained that there was just too much CO2 in the air, which step by step destructed the natural shield zone. I'm not a Photoshop expert, so I wouldn't even know what to look for while looking at these photos he claims to have taken in the year 5000, so you guys let me know, you Photoshop experts watching this. In our number 1 spot today, we have Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, before I started making this list, I was not convinced that time travel would be a possibility, but after making this list, I think I might be convinced that Edgar Allan Poe is a time traveler. Seriously, just hear me out on this one. There are 2 main examples why, and I'm gonna do my best to keep them concise. So firstly, Poe's only completed novel was published in 1838, and it tells the tale of mutiny on a whaling ship lost at sea. The men on the ship realize that they need to resort to some extreme measures in order to stay alive, so they begin drawing straws to see who they're going to sacrifice for food. A boy named Richard Parker drew the shortest straw, and therefore he became the next meal. Okay, so let's fast forward 46 years to 1884, and in real life there are now 4 men who have been set adrift after the sinking of a yacht. These men found themselves in a similar predicament to the novels, and I kid you not, they ended up taking the same route and elected to take the life of and then eat a cabin boy. The cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. Not convinced yet? Well, what if I told you that he accurately predicted a scientific advancement before it was even known by, well, scientists? In 1840, Poe penned the gruesome story The Businessman, in which the narrator suffers a traumatic head injury as a child and later lives a violent life. The weird thing about this story is that he was able to grasp frontal lobe injury so well before it was even a thing that was able to be greatly studied, as the first time behavioral changes caused by this kind of injury were able to be studied didn't come until 1848. An actual neurologist, Eric Altschuler, wrote, "There's a dozen symptoms and he knows every single one. There's everything in that story, we've hardly learned anything more. It's so exact that it's just weird. It's like he had a time machine." Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Moberly-Jourdain incident. This is one of the most famous cases of possible time travel, but it also might just be a ghost story. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what to think, so I'll just tell you the story and let you decide for yourself. In 1901, 2 professors from St. Hugh's College in Oxford, England, went to take a little visit to the Palace of Versailles, which, if you didn't know, was the French royal home until the monarchy was abolished in 1792. That means that this was once the home of Marie Antoinette, and she was one of the last royals to live there before she was executed in 1793. So, on this visit in 1901 by these 2 professors, they're just walking around, seeing the sights, enjoying their time. As they're checking out the private retreat built for Marie Antoinette by her husband Louis XVI, boom, out of nowhere, these 2 just see the Marie Antoinette sitting there, sketching away, dressed in 1780s attire. But not only her, there were a bunch of people also dressed in this same sort of way who seemingly just appeared out of nowhere. Just as quickly as they appeared, however, once the tour guide approached the 2 professors, all of the people vanished. The pair ended up writing a book about their experience, which was quite successful because of how grounded it seemed. Did they travel through time? Did they see ghosts? Or is this all just made up? In our number 9 spot today, we have the bookstore. In 1996, a man and his wife were out in Liverpool doing a bit of shopping. The man's wife went into a bookstore, and instead of accompanying her there, he wandered off down the street in search of a CD store. As he strolled down the street, he began to notice everything getting quiet. After this, he noticed a van that looked like it was from the 1950s that honked and swerved around him. At this moment, he realized that he was somehow standing in the middle of the street and that everyone around him was dressed in 50s styled clothing. Like anyone would be in this situation, he was super confused, and he went to head back to the bookstore where he had left his wife, but when he turned around, the bookstore didn't even exist anymore. Where the bookstore was a minute ago was now a women's clothing store, and as soon as he did, it turned back into the bookshop he had initially left his wife in. He was back in 1996 and could not figure out what the heck had just happened to him. After this whole ordeal, he also learned that the clothing store he had seen and gone into hadn't existed since the 1950s either. Whether this is a real time travel story or there's some sort of other explanation behind it, that poor man was probably absolutely terrified. In our number 8 spot today, we have Hutton and Brandt. In 1932, journalist J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were sent by the German newspaper to the Hamburg shipyard in order to do a story. Everything was going fine and well and normal and honestly kind of uneventful until things took a large, crazy turn. Both Hutton and Brandt realized that they were caught in an air raid and had bombs raining down around them. Brandt, like the dedicated photographer he was, snapped a few photos, but the pair quickly evacuated the area to get to safety. When they returned to central Hamburg all shaken up, no one believed their story at all. They got the photos developed in order to show their proof, but to their surprise, the photos showed no such thing that would suggest the story they were telling. With no evidence and no one around who would believe them, the pair had no choice but to just go on living their lives. 11 years later, however, Hutton was living in London and he opened up the newspaper one day to see what he never expected. The newspaper that day detailed the story of Operation Gomorrah, which was an air raid on Hamburg, and the photos in the paper looked exactly like what he had experienced 11 years earlier. Did these two somehow end up getting teleported to a time 11 years later while they were out doing that story that day? I truly don't know what other kinds of explanations there could be. In our number 7 spot today we have Live Your Lie. A guy on TikTok who goes by the username Live Your Lie has begun to post videos claiming that he is a time traveler from the year 3036, and he offers his warnings to all of us. He tells his followers that they are as free as they will ever be right now, and that our kids won't even see freedom. He says, so suck it up, because as simple-minded as your time period is, you got it pretty good, you just don't know it. Okay, Mr. Live Your Lie, don't absolutely roast us all. Anyway, when asked about the world population in his year, he says it's just over 2 billion people. He talks about something called the Big Blackout, which he says happens in December of 2052. He says that the Big Blackout is when basically everything goes dark for upwards of 5 years. The internet, the power, it all gets disconnected on account of what's called the terrors, but many speculate otherwise. He says that during these years there's riots, turmoil, and that it's just the worst of times, and that it takes 20 years for things to get fully back online. He also adds that in the year 3036 we still have zoos, but all of the largest animals are gone, so the zoos then actually just consist of animals like dogs and cats. I'm honestly not sure what to make of this one. Like, if he really is a time traveler, I appreciate the heads up on what's to come, but couldn't he have also said like one nice thing about the future? Also, if time travel exists in 3036, why doesn't everyone just head back in time to when things were good? I don't know, maybe there's some sort of reason, or maybe he's lying. I guess one day someone will find out for sure. In our number 6 spot today we have Sir Victor Goddard. In 1935, when Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard was still a wing commander, he was instructed to head over to an airbase that was located in Drem, Scotland, that was inactive at the moment. As he flew over the base, he noticed it was in pretty terrible condition and that cattle had now begun grazing through the grass that found its way through the tarmac. Later on, as he was still flying, he found himself in a bit of a bad spot due to terrible weather conditions. To avoid anything bad happening, he decided to land at this inactive airbase and wait out the bad weather. What's weird, however, is as he got close to the base, the torrential downpour abruptly stopped and the sky very suddenly opened up with bright sun shining down. This was weird but not totally unexplainable, but what was unexplainable is that the inactive airbase could now be seen in full use and full of mechanics in blue overalls working on yellow planes. This was weird for a number of reasons. Firstly, he had just seen the base and it was not even close to looking like this, so how could this all have just come out of nowhere? The mechanics weren't wearing their khaki-colored uniforms that were the norm then, and the Air Force didn't use yellow planes. They instead painted all of their planes silver, and there was one plane there that he wasn't able to identify or recognize. Sir Goddard left the situation completely confused and shocked, but that shock only got worse 4 years later when he visited Drem again. After the years that had passed, when he visited again, he saw the exact same scene he had seen 4 years before, like a full deja vu moment. Did he get confused on that day 4 years earlier? Did he fly into the future? Was this some sort of a Flight 828 situation? Unfortunately, there's a good chance we may never know for sure what really happened.
Disappearance stories often feel like fiction, but some are firmly real. Take Flight 19 in 1945. 5 Navy bombers vanished over the Bermuda Triangle during a training exercise. Their last radio transmissions describe instruments failing and compasses spinning. No wreckage was ever found. While explanations range from fuel shortages to storms, pilots' testimony about instruments losing track of time has never been fully explained. It's one of the many aviation cases where technology designed to measure time and direction simply just stopped working. Life aboard a nuclear submarine is one of the strangest human experiments in time. Crews spend months underwater, sealed inside steel with no natural light. With no sunrise or sunset to guide them, their internal clocks begin to drift. Studies have shown that without these natural cues, circadian rhythms completely collapse. Days stretch into 25 hours, sometimes even 26, while others shrink to 20. Sailors often don't even notice until they're exhausted, wired at the wrong hours, and losing track of what morning or night really means. When submariners finally return to the surface, many experience a kind of extreme jet lag as their bodies resync to the 24-hour world. Their sense of time is so warped that it can take weeks to fully recover. In some documented cases, sailors swore that missions felt shorter or longer than they actually were, almost as if they had lived through a different kind of timeline. It is definitely a reminder that without sunlight and natural rhythm, human beings literally lose the ability to measure what a day even is. In the 1960s, an Italian priest named Pellegrino Ernetti claimed he had helped build a machine called the chronovisor. According to him, it was no ordinary device. It could detect residual energy waves left behind by past events, effectively letting people watch history kind of like a broadcast. Ernetti even claimed he used it to witness the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and speeches by Cicero in ancient Rome. Of course, no hard evidence of the chronovisor ever surfaced, and Ernetti himself died before revealing any proof. But the story took an even darker turn decades later. In the 1990s, leaked Vatican documents suggested the church had indeed investigated technologies that might record or reconstruct past moments. The Vatican even issued a strange statement warning that any such device, if real, would be classified as a dangerous tool. Was it a hoax? A metaphor? Or did Ernetti stumble onto something that governments and religious powers wanted kept hidden? Whatever the truth, the chronovisor story highlights humanity's obsession with breaking through the barrier of time and the fear of what might happen if we were to succeed. The Mayan calendar famously ended on December 21st, 2012, sparking worldwide fears of an apocalypse. While the end of the world didn't happen, what's real is that the Mayan system tracks time differently than ours. They use what's called the long count calendar, which operates on cycles far longer than years or centuries. Archaeologists now know December 2012 simply marked the end of one 5,125-year cycle and the beginning of another. But what's strange is how precisely the Mayans could align their timekeeping with astronomical events, far beyond what most ancient civilizations managed. Their calendar works almost flawlessly with modern astronomy, raising the question, how did they understand time so deeply thousands of years ago? In June 1980, residents of Catania, Sicily, started noticing something odd. Their clocks were running fast, not by hours, but by minutes, every day. Watches, alarm clocks, and even public systems all sped up. The anomaly lasted for days before disappearing without explanation. Italian scientists investigated and speculated it might have been electromagnetic interference, possibly from secret military equipment, but no solid cause was ever proven. For one eerie week, an entire city lived outside of normal time. In 1971, physicists Joseph Haffel and Richard Keating flew 4 atomic clocks around the world on commercial jets. When the clocks were compared to identical ones left on the ground, they were no longer synchronized. Clocks that flew eastward had lost time, while those that flew westward had gained it. The differences were tiny, just nanoseconds, but measurable and exactly what Einstein's theory predicted. The experiment was a breakthrough. Time itself isn't absolute. It bends and it shifts depending on speed and gravity. Reality isn't just one universal clock, it's billions of personal timelines all ticking at slightly different speeds. In 1582, when the Gregorian calendar was introduced, Catholic countries skipped ahead 10 days, but Russia refused to adopt it until 1918. By then, their calendar was 13 days out of sync with the rest of the world. For centuries, Russia literally lived in a different time than its neighbors. Historians point out this created confusion in diplomacy, trade, and even record keeping. In a very real sense, one of the largest nations on Earth was living in the wrong year compared to everyone else. In 2010, 33 miners in Chile were trapped underground for 69 days after a collapse at the San Jose mine. The world followed the rescue operation closely, but what many don't realize is that the men reported something even stranger than survival. survival. They lost their sense of time. With no sunlight and only dim lamps, their internal clocks broke down. Some swore entire days had vanished. Others felt like one endless night stretched on forever. Psychologists later explained that without natural light cues, the human brain stops tracking 24-hour cycles. Time becomes much more elastic, stretching and collapsing in ways that feel impossible. When the men were finally rescued, many said they had no idea how long they had been down there. For them, the calendar outside didn't match the one that they experienced. It was proof that time isn't just physics, it's perception, and under the right conditions, even perception can collapse. Imagine if 300 years of history never happened. In the 1990s, German historian Herbert Illig proposed exactly that. He argued that the years between 1614 and 911 AD, the so-called Dark Ages, were largely fabricated. His evidence? Gaps in historical records, suspiciously few archaeological finds, and inconsistencies in the calendar introduced by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. Illig believed powerful rulers, including Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, wanted to position themselves in the year 1000, so they simply invented the missing centuries. Mainstream historians reject the idea, pointing to evidence like tree ring data and astronomical events recorded during that time. Still, the fact that the theory can't be fully debunked leaves a chilling thought. What if parts of the past never even existed? In 2015, astronaut Scott Kelly spent nearly a year aboard the International Space Station, while his identical twin, Mark Kelly, stayed on Earth. When Scott returned in 2016, NASA compared the two. What they found was stunning. Scott's body had actually aged a tiny bit less than his brother's. This wasn't science fiction, it was relativity in action. Time itself moved differently for Scott, traveling at high speed in orbit. Even more bizarre, NASA discovered genetic changes. Scott's chromosomes showed altered telomere lengths, his gene expression was different, and his immune system had shifted. Some of the effects faded, but others remained permanent. The twin experiment proved two things. Time doesn't tick equally for everyone, and leaving Earth can make you biologically different. On June 30th, 2012, the world's official timekeepers added 1 extra second to atomic clocks to keep them in sync with Earth's rotation. Sounds simple, right? Well, wrong. The leap second caused chaos. Reddit, LinkedIn, and Qantas Airways all crashed. Some servers froze, others ran non-stop loops. The problem was that the computers don't like a day with 86,401 seconds instead of 86,400 seconds. To them, that second just shouldn't exist. Since 1972, leap seconds have been added 27 times. Each time, scientists basically have to patch up reality. It's proof that even Earth itself doesn't keep time perfect, and humans are constantly adjusting reality to match. When the Large Hadron Collider fired up in 2009, strange things happened. Just before a major experiment, a burst of liquid helium caused a shutdown. Days later, weird rumors spread. Two physicists had suggested that the Higgs boson might travel backward through time to sabotage its own discovery. While that sounds absolutely wild, what they really argued is that the equations of particle physics allow for time to flow in both directions, and something about the Higgs could cause effects that ripple backwards. Mainstream science never proved this, but the fact that respected physicists even published the idea shows how fragile our understanding of time really is. Calendars are supposed to keep time straight, but history shows they often don't. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar reformed the Roman calendar, creating the Julian system. To reset it, he declared what became known as the Year of Confusion, which lasted 445 days. Whole weeks were effectively invented to realign the seasons. People literally lived through extra time. Later in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII had to fix it again, which meant skipping 10 entire days. October 4th was followed immediately by October 15th. Imagine going to bed one night and waking up in a completely different week. Time, as humans live it, has always been flexible, and sometimes governments simply delete or invent days to make it fit. In 2010, scientists at the National Institute of Standards and Technology ran one of the strangest yet simplest time experiments ever conducted. They placed two atomic clocks just a few centimeters apart, about the distance from maybe your feet to your head. The result? The clock that sat slightly higher ticked faster than the one below. It sounds kind of insane, but this is Einstein's relativity at work. Even the tiniest difference in gravitational pull is enough to alter the passage of time. If you stand on a mountain, time technically runs a fraction of a second faster for you than for someone at sea level. It's an effect too small for humans to feel day to day, but the fact that it can be measured proves beyond doubt that time isn't universal. It's elastic, bending to the laws of speed and gravity. It also means that your head is literally aging slightly faster than your feet every second of the day. In the book of Joshua, there's a passage describing the sun standing still in the sky for nearly a full day, giving the Israelites time to win a battle. For centuries, skeptics dismissed it as a piece of religious symbolism, but in the 20th century, historians noticed something strange. Ancient records from completely different cultures, Chinese, Egyptian, even Mesoamerican, describe a period of unusual daylight around the same era. Some modern astronomers have speculated that an astronomical event could explain it. A massive asteroid or comet passing near Earth might have altered the planet's rotation, creating what looked like a long day. Others suggest a massive volcanic eruption could have created strange refractions of sunlight. None of these explanations have been proven, but even if part of the story is true, it would mean our planet once experienced an actual pause in time. Something so rare it might never happen again. In 2011, the world of physics was rocked when scientists at CERN and Italy's Opera experiment announced something that should have been impossible. Neutrinos, tiny subatomic particles appearing to be traveling faster than the speed of light. If true, it would have shattered Einstein's theory of relativity, upending our understanding of physics and opening the door to time travel. For months, the scientific community debated furiously. Were we really seeing evidence of particles moving backward in time? Could cause and effect actually be reversed? Headlines around the globe declared that physics itself might be broken. Finally, in 2012, the truth emerged. A faulty cable connection had skewed the measurements. The neutrinos weren't defying relativity at all, but this is the eerie part. During those months of uncertainty, respected physicists genuinely believed they might be holding proof that time doesn't work the way we think. Even though the error was found, the memory of that moment lingers. For a brief window in history, the world thought we had seen a crack in the rules of reality itself. In 2003, the FBI reportedly arrested a man named Andrew Carlson who had turned $800 into $350 million in just 2 weeks of trading. The story, first published in Weekly World News, claimed Carlson confessed to being a time traveler from the year 2256. Most dismiss it as a tabloid fiction, but what makes the story linger is that real insider trading investigations at the time did involve individuals making impossibly accurate predictions. Whether Carlson existed or not, the case left people wondering if financial markets sometimes reveal cracks in time itself. In 1901, two English academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, visited the gardens of Versailles near Paris. While walking through, they suddenly felt the atmosphere shift. The air grew heavy, the light dimmed, and the people around them looked strange, wearing old-fashioned 18th century clothing. They even described seeing a woman sketching, who they later became convinced was Marie Antoinette herself. Just as quickly as it began, the vision ended and they were back in the modern gardens. Years later, they published a book called An Adventure, describing their bizarre encounter in vivid detail. Critics dismissed it as imagination, but here's what what makes it harder to explain away. The two women accurately described architectural details and buildings in the gardens that no longer existed in 1901 but had been present in Marie Antoinette's time. They couldn't have known that from guidebooks. Was it a shared hallucination, a trick of the memory, or did they actually step into a pocket of the past? Over a century later, their testimony remains one of the most famous and unsettling time slip cases ever recorded. In 1943, rumors began circulating that the US Navy conducted an experiment in Philadelphia that made the destroyer escort USS Eldridge invisible and possibly even teleported it. Crew members later spoke about nausea, disorientation, and lost time. While the Navy denies that it ever happened, documents show that during World War II, they were experimenting with powerful electromagnetic fields to hide ships from radar. Even if invisibility was never achieved, the fact that sailors reported blackouts and missing time during classified experiments leaves us questioning how far the Navy really went. In the 1970s, NASA launched the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecraft to explore the outer solar system. But by the 1980s, scientists noticed something odd. The probes were slowing down in a way physics couldn't explain. For decades, this tiny drift baffled experts. Some said it was proof of time behaving differently in deep space. In 2012, researchers concluded it was likely due to uneven heat radiation pushing the crafts. Still, the fact that NASA had to spend decades reconciling why spacecraft clocks didn't match predictions shows how fragile our understanding of time really is.
People who step into this barren stretch of desert often report time skips, lost hours, and total disorientation. Located in a desolate part of northern Mexico, where the states of Durango and Chihuahua meet, lies the infamous Zone of Silence. It earned its name because radio signals, compasses, and satellites often stop working here. But there's something even weirder than dead electronics. Visitors report time behaving strangely, like hours going by in what felt like just a few moments, or even the other way around. Some even claim to have walked in circles for what felt like minutes, only to realize the sun had completely shifted across the sky. Scientists have tried to explain it with theories about magnetic fields or meteorite deposits, but none of those quite account for why people lose entire chunks of time or wake up in different locations with no memory of how they got there. Two trained military officers entered this forest and came back hours later with no memory of what happened in between. In December 1980, just outside an American military base in Suffolk, England, strange lights were seen descending into the trees of Rendlesham Forest. Two American officers, John Burroughs and Jim Peniston, were sent to investigate. What they found remains one of the most bizarre military encounters in UK history. They claimed to approach a glowing craft. Their radios malfunctioned, their compasses became unreliable, and when they returned to base, they realized more time had passed than they remembered. They had missing time. Burroughs later suffered medical complications that were allegedly linked to radiation exposure. Others who have visited the forest reported odd feelings of being watched, losing track of time, and having confusing, vivid dreams. Some believe it was a UFO encounter, others say it might be something more ancient and unexplained hiding in the woods. Visitors to this giant hand in the desert say they feel like they've stepped outside of time itself. Rising mysteriously from the sands of the Atacama Desert in northern Chile is a surreal 36-foot tall sculpture of a hand known as the Mano del Desierto, or the Hand of the Desert. At first glance, it might seem like just an eerie piece of art, but travelers who make the remote journey to visit it often report something much stranger. Multiple visitors have claimed that time seems to slow down drastically once they're near it. Watches tick slower, phones freeze, and even their shadows seem to behave oddly depending on where they stand. There are no nearby buildings, no noise, and no real landmarks for miles, creating a vacuum-like silence that many say messes with their perception of time entirely. Some believe the effect is psychological, triggered by the overwhelming isolation. Others blame the intense electromagnetic conditions of the Atacama, one of the driest driest places on Earth. But one thing is clear, time just doesn't feel normal around that massive stone hand reaching out of the ground. Step inside the circle and locals say time vanishes, memories blur, and strange sensations take over. Hidden deep in the woods of Chatham County, North Carolina, lies a mysterious barren circle about 40 feet wide where nothing grows. Known as the Devil's Tramping Ground, this spot has been the subject of local legends for over a century. It's said to be where the devil paces at night, thinking of new ways to cause chaos in the world. But there's more than just spooky stories. Campers have claimed that after falling asleep for what felt like just an hour, they awoke to find an entire day had passed. Others have heard whispering voices, felt strange chills, and found their electronics drained of battery despite being fully charged beforehand. Even animals avoid it, and when scientists tested the soil, they couldn't find a clear explanation for the lifeless patch. Something weird is happening here, and it's something real and deeply unsettling. Entire groups of people suddenly fell asleep and woke up days later with no memory of what happened in between. Kalachi is a small remote village in northern Kazakhstan that baffled doctors and scientists. Starting in 2013, residents began to fall asleep without warning, sometimes for up to 6 days. People would be doing regular tasks like chopping wood, talking, or walking home from work when they'd suddenly pass out. Upon waking, they'd have no memory of what happened. Some experienced vivid dreams, hallucinations, and confusion about how much time had passed. A nearby uranium mine was initially blamed for leaking gases that may have triggered the sleeping sickness, but many of those affected weren't even near the mine, and even after the mines were sealed off, people still reported time-related disorientation and odd memory lapses. To this day, some locals refer to the events as the curse, believing the village itself is sitting on some kind of temporal fault.
Another part of Elig's argument involved strange patterns in the historical record, events that seem to repeat across different cultures. He noticed that some of the major happenings in Byzantine, Islamic, and Western European history looked oddly similar, almost like they were copied or mirrored versions of each other. Not vague themes like wars or political struggles, Elig pointed out specific battles, rulers, and cultural developments that just seemed to line up a little too well, as if someone took one storyline and reworked it multiple times to make history feel more fleshed out than it really was. He believed these echoes were filler, recycled content used to patch together the fake centuries. Instead of inventing 300 years from scratch, the conspirators may have just borrowed pieces of real history from other time periods and repackaged them under different names and dates. That way, the fake era would still look real to anyone who was just skimming through the records. The early Middle Ages are often called the Dark Ages, and Elig took that term really literally. He believed that the lack of written records wasn't due to cultural decline, it was because those years simply didn't exist. He pointed to how few documents survived from 614 to 911 AD compared to other eras, and sure, some writing exists, but a lot of it was copied later or is based on oral traditions passed down and written long after the fact. There's very little that comes directly from that period. For Elig, that was a major red flag. In his view, this wasn't a time when people stopped writing, it was a time that was invented, and that the documents were either retroactively created to make it look real or just never needed because nobody lived through it in the first place. Most historians disagree, saying that war, disease, illiteracy, and collapsing governments made it just harder to preserve knowledge back then. Now for some pushback. One idea is that the weird gaps and inconsistencies come from simple human error. Back in the day, most records were copied by hand. Scribes made mistakes, misread dates, or changed things to suit local politics or religion. Over time, those little errors could have snowballed into bigger timeline problems. Others say that natural disasters might have caused the slowdown, huge volcanic eruptions, plagues, that could have thrown entire societies off track for long periods of time. It would explain why so many things seemed to kind of pause during the early Middle Ages. Things just sucked, and people were busy trying to survive, not building cathedrals or writing books. There's also the possibility that the records did exist but were lost, burned in wars, which there were a lot of, or just rotted away with time. In that case, the holes in history are real, but they don't mean the years themselves were fake. So while Elig's theory pretty wild, it does at least point out some genuine gaps in our understanding, gaps that could have explanations a bit less dramatic than time fraud though. The academic world didn't exactly embrace Elig's theory. Historians, archaeologists, and scientists from all over have looked at his claims and they've pushed back hard. One of the biggest rebuttals comes from astronomy too. We have records of solar eclipses and comets and other sky events going back thousands of years. Those records match up with modern calculations. If a solar eclipse was reported in the year 755 and we can confirm that one did happen, it's a strong sign that the timeline is correct. Things like Halley's Comet have been tracked across centuries, and those sightings line up with the current calendar, not one that's 300 years off. Then there's dendrochronology, or tree ring dating. Scientists use tree growth patterns to track years with really incredible accuracy. Those rings also confirm the existing timeline with no missing centuries. Most experts agree Elig was misreading the data. Still, they don't dismiss what he brings up altogether. It's flawed, but it is interesting. So, if historians have shut it down, why do people still believe in the phantom time hypothesis? Part of it comes down, well, a lot of it comes down to mistrust. A lot of people don't fully trust governments, religious institutions, or experts like historians in general. The idea that those groups could have worked together to rewrite history plays right into that suspicion. It's not just about the dates, it's about control, about who gets to decide what's true and what isn't. There's also a kind of thrill in imagining that we've been living in a lie, that everything we know about the past is off by centuries. It taps into that same appeal as hidden civilizations and long-lost ancient knowledge. People love a good cover-up story, and let's face it, history is full of holes. We don't have all the answers. So when someone like Elig shows up with this bold, strange idea, it does grab people's attention, whether that's right or not. The phantom time hypothesis was introduced in 1991 by German historian and author Heribert Illig. The idea is simple but strange. About 300 years of history, specifically the years between 614 and 911 CE, were completely made up. If Illig is right, we're not living in 2025, we're actually in the 1700s. And everything from the early Middle Ages was just faked. See, Illig looked at the time period and noticed something he thought was kinda odd. There just didn't seem to be a lot there. Hardly any surviving records, barely any major cultural or technological shifts, and not much in the way of solid archaeological evidence. He didn't think that that was just a coincidence either. To him, it looked like those centuries were added later on, intentionally, and thought that the people we believe lived and ruled during that time were either exaggerated or completely fictional. According to Illig, this wasn't just a case of historians making mistakes. He believed it was a deliberate move, made by powerful people who wanted to rewrite the calendar for their own benefit. Whether or not that holds up is another story, but this theory completely flips the way that we think about the timeline of human history. Illig didn't think this fake time period just slipped in by accident. He believed there were real people behind it, starting with Holy Roman Emperor Otto III. According to the theory, Otto wanted to rule during the year 1000 CE, because it had a big religious significance to it. Being the emperor during the first millennium, it just sounds impressive, and it tied neatly into Christian ideas about divine rule and prophecy and all that. The problem, well, he wasn't born in time, so the solution, according to Illig, was to change the calendar. Otto supposedly worked with Pope Sylvester II to pull this off. Together, they allegedly pushed the timeline forward by nearly 300 years to make it seem like they were living in the year 1000 when really it was sometime in the 700s. Illig also roped in Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII. He was known for being deeply interested in history and was responsible for copying and preserving many older texts. Illig thought that Constantine may have helped forge or edit certain documents to help fill in the gaps in this new adjusted timeline. Basically, these three leaders worked together, at least in the theory, to reshape the flow of time itself, making history fit the narrative that they wanted the world to believe. Another one of Illig's big arguments had to do with the calendars. Before the calendar that we use today, most of Europe followed the Julian calendar. It wasn't perfect, it was off by about 11 minutes per year, which added up over time. And by the 1500s, the seasons and dates were noticeably out of sync. So Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar in 1582 to fix this. Now, the calendar change only skipped ahead 10 days to get things back on track, but if the Julian calendar had really been in use since Roman times without correction, Illig argued that the real difference should have been closer to 13 days. It's about 3 extra days unaccounted for, which in his mind matched the roughly 300 phantom years that he believed had been added. Most historians say these numbers aren't as straightforward as Illig made them out to be, but he saw this as a clue. If the math didn't add up, maybe the timeline didn't either. Illig also pointed to what's not there, specifically physical evidence. If the year 614 to 911 CE really happened, where's all the stuff from that time? He believed there was a noticeable lack of buildings, artifacts, and reliable written records from those centuries. For example, most of the castles, cathedrals, and major stone structures we associate with the Middle Ages didn't show up until after the year 900. And the ones that are claimed to be older sometimes don't quite fit stylistically with what came before or after. Illig thought that was suspicious, saying that those structures were either built later than we've been told or misdated entirely. Same goes for everyday items like pottery, tools, and coins. There's a noticeable dip in findings from that period, which Illig thought was too big to ignore. Now, most mainstream archaeologists say it's not that strange. Societies were shifting, literacy rates were low, and records just didn't always survive. But Illig saw it as a hole in the timeline, a gap that only made sense if those centuries never happened in the first place. Then there's Charlemagne, one of the most famous rulers of medieval Europe. Illig didn't just question his legacy, he straight up claimed that Charlemagne never existed. It sounds extreme, but here's how Illig looked at it. Charlemagne's story is full of larger-than-life accomplishments. He supposedly united a huge part of Europe, revived the Roman Empire in the West, pushed Christianity, and kickstarted what's known as the Carolingian Renaissance. That's a lot for one man, and the details are sometimes vague, inconsistent, or based on sources written long after his supposed death. And Illig argued that Charlemagne was more of a political invention, a legendary figure created to give legitimacy to later rulers, especially the Holy Roman Emperors. It's a common move in history. Make up a heroic ancestor to strengthen your own claim to power. To Illig, the reign of Charlemagne was just too perfect, just too clean, and too conveniently placed at the center of this supposed phantom time period. If those centuries were invented, and so was the man said to define them. In his view.
An entire Inuit village disappeared overnight, leaving meals half-eaten and no trace of the people ever found. One of the most chilling disappearances in Canadian history happened in the 1930s at Lake Anjikuni, a remote area in the Nunavut region. A fur trapper named Joe LaBelle arrived in the Inuit village expecting a warm welcome, but instead found total silence. Fires were still burning, food sat on plates, rifles were propped against doorways, and sled dogs were found frozen and starved. But the people, gone. No tracks in the snow, no signs of struggle, just gone. Even more bizarre were the reports from nearby settlements who saw strange glowing lights in the sky and heard odd noises in the days before the disappearance. Some speculated that a mass alien abduction occurred, while others suggested time might have warped in some way and swallowed the village whole. Nothing has ever been found to explain it. On this remote Arctic island, the sun stops setting for months and locals say time starts to lose all meaning. Svalbard is one of the northernmost inhabited places in the world. In the summer, the sun doesn't set at all for 4 full months, and in the winter, it doesn't rise for the same amount of time. At first glance, that sounds just like a quirk of geography, but for many who live there, they report that it has a bizarre side effect on their perception of time. People feel like days stretch endlessly, sleep cycles break down, depression and confusion are common, and strangely, timekeeping devices sometimes malfunction, especially the older ones. Locals joke that in Svalbard, time just gives up trying to keep up. People disappear here, sometimes reappearing hours or even days later with no memory of where they went. Mount Shasta in Northern California is not just a beautiful mountain, it is also a hotspot for some of the strangest stories in the American West. Local indigenous tribes believed the mountain was home to powerful spirits, and in more modern times, the mountain has become the focus of legends about secret underground civilizations and time portals. Hikers frequently report losing time, getting disoriented, disoriented or finding themselves far from where they expected to be. One story involved a man who vanished during a day hike and reappeared nearly 50 miles away with no recollection of how he got there. Others have claimed to meet strange individuals dressed in outdated clothing who vanish into thin air. Scientists have tried to explain it all away with psychological factors and dehydration, but for many, Mount Shasta remains a place where time itself gets a little weird. Planes and ships disappear for hours or even forever, and those who return often report lost time and scrambled memories. That's right, I'm talking about the Bermuda Triangle. Located between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, is the most infamous time anomaly zone in the world. Countless planes and ships have vanished in the area, often in perfect weather and with no distress calls. One of the most famous cases happened in 1970 when pilot Bruce Gernon claimed to fly into a strange cloud formation that surrounded his aircraft. Inside it, his instruments failed and he felt as if the plane wasn't moving forward. When he emerged, he found that he was 100 miles ahead of where he should have been and had somehow traveled that distance in just 3 minutes. Time, he said, had warped. Others have reported clocks stopping, GPS systems glitching, and time loops. Theories range from methane gas bubbles to magnetic interference to more speculative ideas like wormholes. But the truth is, no one really knows why time acts the way it does out there. In the coldest place on Earth, time doesn't just feel frozen, sometimes it actually stops. Oymyakon is a village in Serbia that regularly reaches temperatures of minus 60 degrees Celsius or colder. It's one of the most inhospitable places on Earth for human life, yet people live there year-round. In such extreme cold, locals say strange things happen. Old watches and clocks literally freeze and stop ticking, electronic devices die almost instantly, people report walking short distances only to realize they were outside much longer than they thought. Time feels slower. Some say it's because the cold numbs your senses of reality, others say the endless white landscape plays tricks on your perception. Whatever it is, this place has developed a reputation not just for brutal temperatures, but for being a place where even time itself can't keep up.